Bibliophiles of the Internet. My name is Adriana, and today, my friends, I'm here to bring you what I hope is a quick book review for The Martian by Andy Weir. I feel like I don't need to say much in the way of a synopsis. Basically, it's about an astronaut named Mark Watney who goes on a mission to Mars. Then, in a freak accident, his crewmates believe him to be dead, and they abandon the mission. Then, in an ironic twist, Mark Watney is very much alive and also stranded on Mars. At its heart, The Martian is very much a survival story and a thriller. It's about Mark trying to outthink Mars and trying to master this very difficult terrain. Before we get started, I should mention that I listened to this book on audiobook, and at times I followed along in the text, and that's how I read the book, and I would very much recommend that to other people. One reason is because The Martian is essentially one huge consecutive 300-page long word problem, and it can be really difficult to follow along if you're reading for yourself. But when you have someone who's talking it out for you, it makes a lot more sense, and in my opinion is much easier to digest. And the second reason is because the narrator is wonderful. He really had a lock on Mark Watney's voice, and he totally nailed those audio logs. I felt like he was Mark Watney, and he was just a really personable and charismatic narrator, and I enjoyed him. I thought he did a really good job of narrating the story. So like I said, I would highly recommend listening to the audiobook, and I really enjoyed it myself. But with all of that out of the way, I should talk about my thoughts on the story itself. First off, I want to say that I really do admire and respect Andy Weir for creating this story that takes place in such a complex setting. I mean, it's difficult enough for most writers to create a believable and plausible story that takes place on Earth and in everyday life, and it really is a challenge to retain your authority as the author and by extension as the narrator. So to take such a risk as to set your story in deep space, in Mars, in open space, which are very much unknown terrains, that to me is very gutsy. And the fact of the matter is that Andy Weir navigates this unknown terrain with such unparalleled skill. At no point in this story is the reader even given room to doubt anything that Mark Watney's saying. Not his judgment, not his science, not his calculations. You feel like everything that's being told to you is accurate and that you can trust it. And that's a huge deal, especially because not only is Andy Weir writing about a setting that I would wager he has never personally experienced for himself, but the external conflicts that he's creating for Mark Watney along the way are theoretical problems. And not only is he trying to find solutions to those problems, he has to create outside of the box solutions for those problems. And that's where the fiction element comes in, because Andy Weir is very much inventing new unorthodox ways of engineering and thinking about botany and all these other calculations. I'm pretty sure he's tackling problems about Mars that not many people have had to think about before. And at no point did I question anything he was writing, so that's a very, very big deal. Personally, when I think of how intelligent Andy Weir has to be in order to balance all of these very difficult scientific elements that are happening in the background, the physics, the chemistry, the botany, the engineering, things I can't even name, I'm sure. I'm just so impressed with what he accomplished in this novel in that respect. Of course, I have to talk about the triumph that is Mark Watney's first-person narration. All of his log entries were nothing short of a treasure, and I enjoyed them so much because he has a great sense of humor. He is hilarious, he's sarcastic, he's an asshole, and I loved it. Mark Watney's sense of humor and his unique way of narrating his situation was very key to the success of this novel, because without that little bit of personality, it would have just been a 300-page chunk of calculations. It would have been so dry and no one would have cared. But Mark Watney makes it personable, he makes it engaging, and because of him and his voice, this is an entertaining story to read. And like I said, his log entries were pretty much the best part of the story in my opinion. Obviously, like I said earlier, this book is also a really great thriller because you never know what's going to happen to Mark Watney. He's navigating a very unpredictable terrain and you have no idea how he's going to tackle the problems that he lands himself in. So because of the setting and the situation, there is a heightened sense of danger throughout this entire book, and that's what keeps the reader on the edge of their seat, and that's what makes it so exciting to read. All of that praise being said, I did have significant issues with this story, and I think that's what kept me from enjoying this book as much as other people have in the past, and it definitely wasn't a 5-star book for me. And one of the central issues I had with this story was how disappointing the characters were. We can just start with the main character himself, Mark Watney. I don't know anything really about him. I know that he's an astronaut, I know that he's very intelligent and that he's good in a tight spot, and I know that he's snarky. But he never talks about his family. He never talks about why he wanted to become an astronaut or what this mission to Mars meant to him. He doesn't talk about the people that he's left back on Earth, the things that he misses. He doesn't talk about what he likes and what he dislikes. I don't know anything about him besides what he's dealing with externally on Mars. And especially because this is a story that is focused on a person who is literally far removed from humanity and society, I expected more of a look at what was happening psychologically and emotionally with Mark, but that is something that we never get to see. And that's something that baffles me because it's not like he doesn't have a lot of downtime to think about the situation that he's in and to think about other things, but when he's doing his log entries, he just never bothers to talk about any of the things that make him human. The fact that we don't know Mark Watney as a human is something that's really disappointing to me, especially because when you think about it, he is the main character, so he is the most fleshed out character in this story. And that's not really saying much. And then it just goes downhill from there because there's a huge cast of characters in this novel. There are Mark's fellow crewmates who worked with him on the Ares mission, and then there's a ton of people down on Earth at NASA and everyone who's watching and they're assessing the situation from Earth, and all of those characters were just cardboard cutouts of humans. I didn't know anything about them. I didn't really care about them. They just kind of were there to serve the plot. And I think the biggest issue with those third-person sections which are focused on characters who are not Mark Watney is the fact that they're very strongly dependent on dialogue, and it's really bad, painful dialogue to read. To me, the dialogue was so poorly written because it was incredibly transparent. It was so painfully clear that these conversations existed only for the benefit of the reader and not for the benefit of the conversation or the character. And the thing is, if you need to inform your readers about something that's happening in the story, do it through narration, not through dialogue. If you do it through dialogue, it just feels lazy. And I think that's a huge reason why I couldn't connect with or care about so many of the characters in this book, because this novel is like 98% comprised of dialogue. And when a story is so dependent on dialogue, you're just not going to get the opportunity to feel things as deeply as you would if it were written a different way, especially if that dialogue is not being used effectively, and that is the case in this book. And lastly, I just wanted to say that there was never a point in this novel where I genuinely feared for Mark Watney's life. Yes, he had setbacks along the way. Yes, he had very difficult obstacles he had to overcome, and a lot of the things that happened to him were very unpredictable, and that's what made the book exciting to read. But at the same time, I always felt like he had the situation under control, or he would have the situation under control shortly. And I guess that's the danger of making your character too one note. He's too competent for his own good, and that sounds strange, but it's true. So as you can see, I had quite a number of issues with this story, despite the fact that I did really enjoy some parts of it, and I do think that some aspects of this story should be applauded, but in the end, I gave The Martian 3.5 out of 5 stars. In the comments down below, please let me know if you have also read The Martian, because I would love to hear your thoughts on the story as well. But that is everything I had for this review today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and I will catch you on the flip side of the page.